Let's talk some baseball with Mark Feinsand, who joins us now. Mark, welcome. How are you?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
All right. So we're 2 days away. What, if anything, do you think? Does anything have you concerned with 2 days to go?
No, I mean, as we've spoken about before throughout this whole thing, the biggest concern is just whether the league's going to be able to pull this off. And I would say the testing numbers have been pretty optimistic. The last week they tested 10,500 people, and I think they had 6 positives. So 0.05%. They're going to be able to get this season in if the numbers stay like that. But of course, that's going to depend on players and staff and front offices, et cetera, just being really committed to doing the right thing and staying where they're supposed to stay and not veering outside of their protocols. But no, right now I think you have to be optimistic about where the league is.
All right. What's the from the Yankee standpoint? What's going to be the biggest surprise on the roster?
I'm not sure there's going to be any huge surprises. They announced Michael King will be on the roster, which
right.
I think he impressed a lot. Debbie Garcia, Clark Schmidt both had good camps, but didn't get to the roster. The fact that Schmidt's not on the 40 certainly hurts his chances right now, just because they're not going to add him if they don't have to right now. But I think with the way that this season is going to shape up with shortened spring training, potential for more injuries, obviously the COVID situation, anybody on that 60-man player pool is going to have a chance to contribute at some point, you would have to figure. So the fact that some of these guys who aren't going to make the roster, showed some stuff during these few weeks here, should certainly be encouraging for Yankee fans.
Is there one guy that is there a battle that you think is going on as far as, listen, we know there's going to be flexibility in the pitching staff. There's going to be a lot of flexibility in everybody's bullpen, even a bullpen as good as the Yankees. There's going to be flexibility in these bullpens. How about as far as the guys who are going to play? Do you think there's any battles still going on that are going to be interesting as far as guys fighting for playing time?
I think obviously the one that you look at is sort of where does Andujar fit in, just because Urshela obviously had such a good year last year. And
Urshela is really good, and the way you watch him pick, he is a great third baseman. I don't know if he's going to hit again. He might have had just had a career year with the bat. I don't know, but he has got, he's really good. He's Gold Glove good with the glove. He's legitimately a great third baseman.
Yeah, and I think that's why, Andujar, the fact that they've got him playing some outfield, obviously the outfield situation is a little crowded as well, but, guys get days off. Nobody
and Andujar can just flat
day.
hit, too. He can just hit, that.
Right. So, you figure Stanton's going to see most of his at-bats at DH with Gardner Hicks and Judge in the outfield, but look, Judge has an injury history.
Judge Stanton and Hicks are all going to get hurt. They always get hurt. Let's be honest. All three of them get hurt.
If nothing else, Boone's not going to play them all 7 days a week, right? You've got 60 games in 66 days. So that's 6 off days scheduled over 9 weeks, basically 9.5 weeks. So I think Andujar is going to get his opportunities to play. But obviously, it's nice to have him knowing that if something happens with any of the outfielders or Urshela, he can go either way. But I think I'd be very intrigued to see sort of how his season plays out in terms of how many at-bats is he getting and where is he getting them.
And what about Frazier? Frazier, too. I'm not the biggest Frazier fan, but he can hit. He's not a great fielder. He's got a little attitude issue. Maybe he's grown up a little. I'm not sure. I'm not around him. But he can hit.
He can definitely hit, and I think the attitude issue, from what I understand, is not as prevalent as it was maybe last year. I think he learned some lessons from that and, matured a little bit, or maybe had some people sort of give him some advice on how to conduct himself. But when he had his attitude problems and ended up spending most of the year in AAA, that can teach you a lot, knowing that you feel like you're good enough to be in the big leagues. So, again, he's a good guy to have as one of your contingency plans if there is an injury. Like you said, those guys get hurt all the time. So, Frazier could find himself with some playing time down the line, or, Frazier could find himself getting traded. He's been
he definitely
traded
could.
once. He's been traded once, obviously, in the Andrew Miller deal. And the Yankees, if they decide that they are, a pitcher away from feeling like they're the favorites to win the World Series, even in this weird season where the trade deadline is 5 weeks after the season starts, but 4 weeks before the season ends. I don't think they would trade Frazier for a 4-week rental. But if there's a pitcher with a year or two of control, especially knowing that Tanaka's going to be a free agent and Happ's going to be a free agent and Paxton's going to be a free agent, it wouldn't surprise me if Cash made a move.
And and Ford too. That's a guy who he can make his way into the. I mean, he's a dangerous bat, and he's left-handed. I mean, and you saw it last night. I mean, the guy is a productive hitter also, and he's left-handed at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, and he was productive last year, and people really liked what they saw from him a year ago. So he's a guy that, the Yankees didn't look at him as sort of a flash in the pan or a guy who came up and, just sort of ran into a few. They like him a lot. Aaron Boone likes him a lot. And, it wouldn't surprise me if he's got some at-bats coming his way again as well. Again, we have to see what the injury situation looks like. But at least the Yankees appear on paper to have a lot of depth going into the season. And in a season like this, you need that. Estrada's another kid who's hit the heck out of the ball of late, and he was...
he's a good player, but you know what? There's no room for him. There's just no room.
He was told today he's going to be on the opening day roster.
And you know that he's a good player. I mean, he could play on a lot of teams. He's just, here he can't play.
And remember, the opening day roster that they'll start out with Thursday is going to be 30 players. 2 weeks later, it goes to 28. 2 weeks later, it goes to 26, where it stays for the rest of the season. So, a couple guys who make this opening day roster have 2 weeks of time to enjoy it before they get cut down to 28.
Yankees and Dodgers obviously are loaded. We know that. A lot of people think this could help teams that aren't of the same level get off quick start maybe, and then see if you could steal your way to the postseason. You hear the White Sox a lot. You hear, a lot of people like the A's, but the A's have been good for years, so we know the A's are good. I mean, but you hear White Sox a lot. You hear Texas, Cincinnati, Texas. Which one of these teams you think is a dark horse?
I like Cincinnati. That's a tough division in the NL Central because the Cubs, the Brewers, the Cardinals are always very competitive. But Cincinnati's been building towards something, and they made a couple of big free agent signings this year with Moustakas and Castellanos. They've got really good pitching, right? We saw Sonny Gray bounce back with a really good year last year. Trevor Bauer's in a free agent year. Luis Castillo is the best pitcher on that staff. I like the Reds, and I think that while those other teams in the Central are good, none of them are a juggernaut to sit there and say that they can't be taken down. So if I had to go with one of the trendy teams that people are, sort of sleeping on, I would like the Reds. The White Sox have to show it to me. We hear for the last 3 years, they got the young players. This is going to be their year to come up. They brought in Keuchel. They made a couple of moves that I liked. But the Twins are really good. And they added Josh Donaldson, and they added Maeda. And I think the Twins are the team to beat in that division without a question.
Talk about Mark Feinsand. Do you think the Nationals are just going to rest on their laurels, or do you think that they can fill some of these holes?
Well, I'm not sure resting on their laurels is what's going to happen, but they do have to, replace their best player for a second year in a row.
And they got some guys who don't want to play, and they got some issues with guys. So you wonder if it's going to be a year where everything comes together.
If Soto and Robles can be themselves. Trey Turner's a really good player. You've got some guys there. Key Boom, the young rookie at third base, has to show that he can play every day and be productive. I think you look at the Nationals, and if Strasburg and Scherzer and Corbin are doing their thing, and the bullpen can hold it together with the guys that they brought back, they should be a dangerous team. I don't know if they're going to win again, but they certainly can't afford to get off. Their World Series season started out 19-31.
Yeah, they went their way with 27-33 right after 60 games, right?
You start out 19-31 in your first 50 this year, and you're not going to be given a chance to play in October. So, they need to get off to a better start, obviously. But they've got some players to do it. Losing Rendon hurts them, but they're, I think of them along the lines of the way the Mets were about 5 years ago, where you just said they are going to live and die the way their starting rotation goes. And, with Scherzer and Strasburg and Corbin, if those three guys are on their game, then the Nationals, are going to certainly be there in the end.
Let's talk Mets for a second. Mets have a good team. The one thing I would be leery of with the Mets is they could have a really shaky defensive team. That's the one thing that scares you about them. They could be a really lackluster defensive team overall, or at least substandard in that regard. And I understand the bullpen could still blow up. We do understand that too. I'm not a Diaz guy. I do think Betances will be a big help. What's your thoughts on the Mets?
It's funny, you look at their bullpen, and assuming that Diaz is better than he was last year, even if he's not back to where he was in that last year with Seattle, you've got Diaz, Betances, Familia, Justin Wilson's a good arm. They've got some arms in that bullpen that I like, and if they can, sort of solidify the end, then they can mix and match leading up to it. I think Betances, if he's healthy, we all know how good he is.
I think Betances could be a big help, yes.
Betances has been one of the 5 best relievers in baseball for the last 5 or 6 years, before he got hurt. And I loved watching that guy pitch every couple of days when I was still covering the Yankees. To me, the question is with the Mets is can Porcello and Waka and Matz hold up their end of the bargain at the back end of the rotation? Losing Syndergaard was a huge blow for them. DeGrom, assuming he's over his little back issue and he's healthy, will be DeGrom. Stroman's pitching for a contract, so you have to assume that's going to motivate him a little bit. And their offense is really good. I agree with you, the defense is a little shaky, but I don't think it's, really problematically shaky. I think it'll cost them occasionally here or there, but they've got enough offense to slug their way past a lot of teams. And if they get the starting pitching and the bullpen work, they should be pretty good this year. And I think again, like we just talked about with the Central, with 4 teams that I think could potentially win it, I honestly think 4 teams in the National League East, you can make a case for any one of them to win the division this year.
All right, you have some really good young players in New York now. Great players in New York. You got obviously Judge, and you got the Polar Bear. You got Torres, who's had 2 incredible seasons. Really amazing. Probably under the radar. Probably hasn't been gotten enough credit that he deserves. He actually deserves more credit than he's gotten for how well he's played the first 2 years. He's actually been better than people have even talked about him. They've kind of taken him for granted, I think, a little bit. He was supposed to be good, and he's been good, but he's been even better than that. Plus, he's played different positions, which is hard to do. And then you have McNeil, who's underrated too, who's a guy who's come up and hit .325 for 2 years. Of the 4 guys, which one would you say is, if you had to pick one not to have a good year, which one would you pick?
If I had to pick one not to have a good year.
Or to have a struggling season. Those 4 guys, they all could be all-star players. They all could be top-of-the-line players. I think McNeil could be a batting champion. I think he's that good. We know how good Gleyber Torres is. We know how good Judge is. We know how good, obviously, the Polar Bear was last year. So the guy comes in and has that kind of rookie season. What guy would you say, if I had to pick one to struggle this year, it would be this one?
I'd probably say Alonso, just because when you follow up a rookie year like that, and I'm not saying he's going to be the classic sophomore slump. I think he's going to have a good year. But if I had to pick one of those 4, a lot of times trying to live up to that standard that you set in your rookie year, it's just difficult. Pitchers know you a little better. The leagues know you a little better. People are coming after you. You're not going to surprise anybody after hitting 53 home runs last year. So I think, Alonso certainly has, and plus, Alonso could hit, a third of the home runs per at-bats that he hit last year, and people are going to look at it and say, well, what happened to all the home runs? When you hit 53, obviously it's hard to compare in a 60-game season, but, when you hit 53, if you came back this year and hit 34, it's a pretty good season, but people would say, oh, you hit 20 more home runs last year. What's wrong with it? So I think if they're all healthy, I'd probably have to pick Alonso. But, the health factor is huge, and Judge has to show he can stay healthy. So, Judge is the one that I think has the most to prove in terms of being able to stay on the field, because we know that when he's on the field, he produces. But you're right about Torres. 2 years, 2 All-Star appearances. The guy's just been
middle infielder playing like that, hitting in the postseason, hitting 3 home runs in the postseason, big hits in the postseason. I mean, the kid's really, came up. He was supposed to be a star. He's been a star. And he's done everything everybody's asked him to do. He really has. He's been sensational for 2 years. Right now, who's the best player in New York?
I would probably go with Garrett Cole, but
let's leave the 2 pitchers out. Let's leave DeGrom. Let's leave Cole and DeGrom out of it for a minute, okay? Of the position players, who's the biggest? We all know that. All right, if you're going to say right now, Judge is probably the biggest star of the 4. Okay, we all agree on that. I think based on what they've done for their careers so far. But right now, which one of the 4 would you take to have the biggest season this year?
I was going to say, if I'm drafting a team out of the Yankees and Mets right now, Gleyber Torres is my first pick.
Yeah, I think I would agree.
Of the position players, I'd take Cole and DeGrom 1 and 2, but if of the position players, I think Gleyber Torres.
Would you take Cole or DeGrom?
I'd probably take Cole just because he's about a year younger, and he's shown the ability to do what he's doing in the American League. But look, they're 1-1A. I think they're the two best pitchers in baseball, and I think you can make an argument for either one of them. If I had to take one to start a team with right now, I'd probably take Cole just because he's younger.
Who's the key to the Yankee season? Which player?
I would have to say Paxton. I think the Yankees, they know what they're going to get from Cole. Tanaka, assuming that he's recovered from that nasty injury, we know what we're going to see from Tanaka. He is, as steady as a guy goes. But the Yankees need that third pitcher to step up and really, help solidify the rotation, take a little pressure off of the back end. And I think Paxton, going into a contract year, certainly has some pressure on him to deliver. They have a great offense, and I think if one guy has a bad year, if Stanton doesn't have a great year, or if Sanchez doesn't have a great year, or Judge gets hurt, there's plenty of other guys in that lineup to take off that pressure. But I just think right now, if Paxton does not get off to a good start and doesn't have a good year, that rotation is going to look a lot thinner, even with Cole at the top of it.
And who's the key guy to the Mets in your mind?
I'd say Stroman probably for the same reason. We know what DeGrom's going to do. We talked about the three guys in the back. If two of them can perform up to level, that's going to help. But Stroman really needs to step up and fill that number two where they're missing Syndergaard. It's easy to say Diaz, but again, I think with Betances there, you have a backup plan. If he doesn't get it done, the Mets could benefit from Robinson Cano bouncing back and having a Robinson Cano type offensive season as well. That would certainly go a long way, towards making this a more complete team, especially with everybody watching the kid out in Seattle and keeping an eye on what he's going to be doing.
Do you think? Obviously, the Yanks are odds-on to make the postseason. It'd be a shock if they didn't. Do you think the Mets will make the postseason?
I think they. That's a tough one. I think they're going to be in the race for the wild card. I don't know if they get there. It's in this 60-game thing, the wild card, those two wild card spots could be separated. You could have 5 teams within 2 games of each other. So I like the Mets to be in that mix. But I think I would say it's going to be them, the Reds, the Nationals, and the Brewers sort of battling it out for those 2 spots.
If this had been a regular season with Cole here, there would have been a lot of pressure on the Yankees this year to finally, at least get to a World Series. I mean, without any question. I think a lot of that's been alleviated because it's just such a year of such incredible upheaval. You buy that, or you think there's still a lot of pressure on them?
I think there's a lot of pressure on them, but I think there will be a lot of pressure on them come October, assuming they get there. Unless you end up with 2 or 3 big players testing positive, and all of a sudden that throws your whole team out of whack, or 2 or 3 big players getting hurt, regular baseball injuries. Injuries are the only thing that should derail this team this year. I think if everybody stays relatively healthy, there's no reason this team shouldn't get to the playoffs. And then once they get there, then the pressure's on, because then, the one thing they've been missing was that big horse at the top of the rotation, and they've got that now. And so Cole is going to be expected to go out there and dominate every time he touches the ball in October, sort of the way Sabathia did in 2009 for them. And if he can do that, then that'll alleviate some of the pressure on everybody else, because everybody else in that team has pretty much showed that they have the ability to produce in October. Stanton's going to have some pressure on him again this year.
Cole's a better pitcher than Sabathia. I mean, Sabathia never was as good as Cole is right now. It never was as good as Cole is now. Cole is really scary good now.
He is scary good, although if you remember how good Sabathia was in those
he was good, but not like this. This guy's pitched to scary numbers.
Before he came to the Yankees, he had like a 1.5 ERA over 4 months. So
yeah, but I never felt as convinced as I was with this guy. This guy's become like automatic. He's been unbelievable.
Now look, as good as we all knew CeCe was when they signed him, there are bigger expectations for Cole, and it's actually sort of the same scenario where CeCe came here and the Yankees hadn't won a World Series in 9 years. Well, Cole came here, and they haven't won a World Series in 11 years. So they've got that same, for the Yankees, that feels like an eternity. So he's going to have some pressure on him to get them back to the promised land.
There'll be pressure on Stanton to do something. I mean, because and listen, otherwise he becomes just the eighth wheel, not the fifth wheel. I mean, with because I mean he is so unpopular now. Could you imagine another bad postseason? I mean, I can't even imagine how unpopular he'd be.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Stanton is he doesn't have to go out there and carry the team. He can. He has the ability to do that, but he doesn't have to. Whereas, he can go out there, and as long as he plays well, he doesn't have to be the star. He doesn't have to, put them on his back. But he can't go out there and go 1 for 15 with 13 strikeouts either. Go out there, hit a couple home runs, contribute to a winning series, and no one's gonna give him grief. Come up with one big hit, and you can erase that stigma of being a guy who can't produce in October, as we've seen so many guys do. They have that reputation, they go out there, they get that one huge hit, and all of a sudden sort of the weight of the world comes off their shoulders. So, Stanton can help himself by putting up a good game or a big hit early in the postseason, to help move on from that reputation.
It has been a traumatic year for baseball. Well, a lot of it by its own doing. I mean, as we know. I mean, they created a lot of this stuff for themselves, as we know, and didn't handle things very well. Where do you think they are right now as they're 2 days away from starting the season?
I think there's a lot of optimism. I think guys are happy that the 3 weeks of summer camp with all the testing seems to have gone well. And, that was the biggest fear, was that they were all going to get where they had to go, and all of a sudden you were going to see spikes of cases, 5-10 cases per team, and that they were going to have to shut this down. But, the protocols they put in place seem to be working, and I think guys are excited that, we're a couple of days away from real baseball happening.
You don't want a couple of more teams without homes, though. That could happen quickly, too. You already have one. You don't want a couple more. That could happen if the state of California ever gets shut down, that's a nightmare for baseball.
Oh, no question about it. Those teams, I would have to imagine, at least they're close to Arizona. They all have ballparks in Arizona where they could play. Toronto is having its situation right now where
they're going to play in Buffalo, right?
Well, Pittsburgh actually seems.
Excuse
to be
me, I mean play in Buffalo
well.
is what. Yes, I mean they've decided on playing in Pittsburgh instead of Buffalo, right?
I don't know if it was actually made official. I know there was talk about it. The Pirates seem to be on board with it, and so they're still, I think, finalizing.
Was there any reason why they chose Pittsburgh? I don't know what that is. Was there a reason why they chose Pittsburgh?
I think it's probably just it's a big league facility. So you've got big league clubhouses and big league weight rooms and batting cages, as opposed to spending all your home games at a AAA ballpark.
I mean, versus any other NL team. Was there any reason why it was Pittsburgh?
Probably just proximity. It's not too far away, and Pittsburgh has not been a hot spot for the virus, so I think there was some openness to letting them be there. And it's probably just an easy city. The ballpark's beautiful. There's hotels right downtown, right near the ballpark, that probably make it easy for both the Blue Jays and the visiting teams. So I would imagine that all of that went into the decision.
All right. Listen, thanks very much. Enjoy. Now, what do you do? Do you stay away from the ballpark? Do you go to the ballpark? What's your role?
I will most likely be covering most everything that I'm covering from home.
Okay.
The way that they're doing it is, even if you're at the ballpark, you're still doing your interviews over Zoom. So
doesn't make any sense then. Right?
The fewer people that have to be there, and less clutter in the press box and just less exposure, the better. So as long as I can do my job from home, I will probably continue to do that.
So if you went to the ballpark, you wouldn't get any access to the players before the game anyway, right?
You wouldn't get the before or after. Basically, the players and coaching staff and front office are considered Tier 1 and Tier 2 players or people there. Media and other support staff are considered Tier 3, and you're not even allowed on that.
Gotcha.
On that